you are American and have been thinking about claiming asylum in Canada, I need you to watch this video.
If you're American, please do not try to flee to Canada. I know that sounds harsh, but I have to warn you that you might.
Americans will no longer be able to freely cross into Canada.
If you are a U.S. citizen and you do decide to flee to Canada to seek for an asylum over there, the Canadians are going to deport you back to the United States. So it will be safer for you to find a different country to seek your asylum from, or just look for a country that is accepting U.S. asylum seekers. Don't go to Canada, because if you do go to Canada to seek for an asylum over there, they are going to deport your ass back to the United States. You hear me? I'm going to play you a few videos right now.
If you are American and have been thinking about claiming asylum in Canada, I need you to watch this video. We've had first-hand reports coming through from people trying to claim asylum at the land border between Canada and the US. These people were threatened with arrest and also threatened that the Canadian Border Patrol would notify US authorities that they'd tried to claim asylum. This doesn't seem to be happening to everyone, but let's say that those it happened to are not white and or have obvious physical disabilities. Just to be clear, as of right now, Canada does not offer asylum as an option for Americans unless you meet some very niche exceptions. There is an agreement between Canada and the US that prevents citizens claiming asylum at the other country. The exceptions are basically you have a valid Canadian visa, you face the death penalty in the US or in your home country, you're under 18 and neither of your parents are in the US, or you've already got close family members who are living in Canada. We know of a few people who've been allowed to sort of stay and go through an appeals process, but until something is formally, legally changed, Canada is not an option for asylum for most Americans. At Help Me Leave, we want to make sure that people understand the extremely high risks of attempting to seek asylum in Canada right now. If you are Canadian and think that at-risk groups like trans people should be able to come to Canada and claim asylum, we need you to put pressure on your politicians to change the Safe Country Agreement. Jay published a report last week called No Longer Safe that makes the case for why the US is no longer a safe country for certain groups. It's a great report to consider sending to your local representative and force them to acknowledge what has changed.
If you're American, please do not try to flee to Canada. I know that sounds harsh, but I have to warn you that you might end up being banned from the country or deported into ICE custody. So please think very carefully. Canada is not accepting refugees at this time. I know there's been a lot of rumors about that over the last year, but we currently still have the Safe Third Country Agreement in place with the US, which means that if an immigrant landed in the US, they won't accept them then moving to Canada. And we also are seeing a ton of just misinformation out there. Let me show you kind of a few headlines to give you an idea of what's been happening from our side of the border. This is just one that happened around Christmas. Haitian migrants are at risk of landing in ICE custody. This was in the Montreal Gazette. Asylum seekers who are coming here. Now, this is just one headline. You could Google this and find a ton of headlines because I have been seeing them since last February of people trying to come here and getting deported. There's also been a lot of talk about Canada accepting the LGBTQI plus refugees. There is a program through the Canadian government, so you can find information on this. However, when you look into more of the details of the program, it's through the United Nations Refugee Agency. They have referrals, private sponsorships, but there are criteria that are involved in that. So this is something you should be doing with a lawyer, the UN. There's something called the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Partnership, where the Rainbow Refugee Society helps Canadians sponsor 50 people a year. So that is a thing. And there's also government-assisted refugee programs and private sponsorships of refugees, but they do have to go through actual recognized organizations. This is not something where you can just show up at the border and say, I'm queer, please help me. These have been in place for quite some time. Canada has long accepted refugees from around the world. It is one of the points of pride of our country. And these programs exist because of, there's a whole section on that website about refugees from Afghanistan who are escaping persecution for being part of the queer community. So It is a much more complicated process, and there are a lot of laws around that. Similarly, you can't just come here and, like, if you're doing remote work or something, you can't just come here and decide to remote work. I know that there was a woman over on a different social media app who just brought her whole family up here and was trying to buy a house in Calgary and figured she was an influencer, so she could just work for wherever. But you do have to ask the Canadian government. You can't just come here. And then we're seeing a lot of border jumpers, frankly. Like, this is just 3 different headlines from September, October, November in the area where I live in Abbotsford. We are seeing tons of border jumpers. I've lived in the city for 30 years, and only recently Black Hawk helicopters have been flying above our heads, and we've seen a ton of people the customs service border agents have been patrolling the area and arresting people. There are farmers who are saying there's people coming through their fields. Like, this has been a big deal. It's very dangerous. Please don't do that. You will be arrested and immediately sent back. So please don't do that. We also saw, like, last winter, it's also winter time. So I remember last winter there were there were people who were trying to escape America, basically, and they were going through Alberta, I believe, and Manitoba in winter and with nothing with them. And I remember one of them, I did a story about this a long time ago. One of them actually died from this incident. It is very, very high risk. So I realize that things are very bad in the United States right now, but I don't want people to have a sense of false hope or get themselves into a situation where it's going to end up being worse. We don't want you to end up in ICE custody. So we don't want you to come here, our government have to turn you back, and then you end up in a much worse situation than you were in. So that is just my warning to Americans. I know it's not particularly hopeful, but it is realistic. And unfortunately, in these times, you need to have sources of information just telling you the truth of how it might go for you if you try those things. So if you are looking to emigrate to Canada, you would have to check to see which provinces are still accepting if you work in the healthcare fields. I know that there were, like, BC and I think Ontario were provinces that were accepting people who work in healthcare because we have a great need for people who work in healthcare, but I'm not sure if those programs are still accepting. I know that in BC at one point we had like 3,000 applicants that they were waiting through. So they could be a little bit behind on that. It's not an immediate solution, but it could be something for you. That is just a real sobering look at what's going on between the borders here. And I just wanted to reiterate this again. I have made these videos before over the course of the year, that Canada has been threatened, to let people know we are also under threat. So running to us is probably not going to be the safest option for you either.
Americans will no longer be able to freely cross into Canada. The Canadian government just announced that certain unmanned remote checkpoints on the Canadian border that allows Americans free access into the country are going to be discontinued following the ongoing escalations of tensions between Canada and America. In case you haven't heard, Donald Trump is the president, like the guy from Home Alone 2. And basically, he's made it part of his mission to antagonize pretty much every ally the United States has ever had. He tried to get another fascist elected in Canada, but unfortunately for him, he lost to Mark Carney, who is also a businessman similar to Trump, but he actually has some sense in his brain. And Canada has taken on a new stance where it's like, we're not going to back down to America. And if they want to treat us badly and try to ruin our trade, then we're not going to allow people to come into our country. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't go to Canada now if you're an American, but a lot of people don't know that there's parts of America that are basically Canada. Like the northern part, like the northeastern part, like say, parts of New York or like Minnesota. There's parts of the country where the most convenient way to get there in America is to go through Canada. So because our countries have historically been so close, there are just like unmanned checkpoints where you can just drive through Canada and then, get back to America if you want to. But not anymore. And now pretty much every single checkpoint is going to be like a border crossing, which ultimately means that people will make less money because it's inconvenient. People will go to jail, I'm assuming, because they want to break the rules. And just overall, two countries that have loved each other for literally like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, just don't anymore. Canadians hate us, as they should.
Feel like with everything going on right now in the United States, like I stated in my previous videos, this is retaliation from other countries. You can't just treat people badly and expect them to treat you nicely. I think all of this is because of what is going on right now in America. Most countries are tired of it. Countries have had enough of whatever it is that is going on. They don't want any more Americans infiltrating their countries. They're tired of, they're just tired of their people being treated badly and disrespectfully, and Americans coming into their countries and expecting a warm welcome into their country. So I think this is all a retaliation of whatever it is that is going on. And I feel like if you're an American citizen and you do feel like you need to seek an asylum in any kind of country, anywhere, make sure the country that you're going to, they are accepting asylum seekers in your country, because Canada is definitely going to send your ass back to the United States. You know what I mean? So yeah. So don't go to Canada. Just go somewhere else. There's a lot of countries that you can go. But anyways, let me know what you think about this story down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in my next video.